Okay, so let's get started with top-down programming logic. As I said in the introduction, top-down is about just abstracting to the core things of what you've actually got to do in it. So, just to give some orientation to this, if you're going to be following along, this videos folder that I've got here is simply just where I'm storing the videos for this one series. Okay, so if you're going to follow along, you don't need this videos folder. Alright, but ultimately you don't need to be kind of typing this stuff out that I'm doing. It's just listening and learning about the logic, because that's all it is. So our example that we're going to do, let's just make our we're going to do login logic. Okay, so you've been user login logic. You're a developer in a team, and the boss has come to you and said the rest of the team are doing X, Y, Z, and they're building the program, the website, or whatever, and we need a login page. The designers have done the login page and they've done everything else, and now what they need is to have verification that the user's logged in. Alright? Which information, you need to tell us which information they need to send you, okay, and they want in response a couple of things. Okay, so you're like, right, wait a minute, response is they want a result to be either true or false. Alright, true being if the person's logged in, false being if it's not. Okay, they want an error. They want an error explaining problem. If we spell problem correct, first of all, we want error explaining the problem. Alright, and that is it. So ultimately you say to the person coming to you, alright, well what I'll do is I'll return an array of information. Okay, and that's it. And I'll also give some other stuff for them to use if they want to, but ultimately the main thing is going to return an array of result and error. If the result is true, there's no error. If there is the result is false, then there's an error. So that's kind of what you're contracting to say. So the request as such, which you're saying to the person for now, well, I need a username and I need a password. Right? That's essentially what I need in the beginning. Alright? And you're like, well, okay, good. So my request is that I need a username and password, and I need some way of authenticating. Authenticating. I'm a programmer. I'm not a person who writes books. Authenticating if already logged in. Yeah. So let's just say we need a cookie. Alright, so that's ultimately what we need, is that we need to have some form of way of them saying whether or not they're logged in. So we're kind of doing two things here. We're logging the person in and we're checking whether they're logged in. Alright? And now the other question is that we need to know, essentially, log out. For the time being, what we're going to say is we're going to forget about the logging out thing. We're just going to assume that the cookie, for example, just evaporates. Now, at this one point, we're kind of going a little bit more bottom to top. Alright, but the whole idea of this is top down, so we're abstracting this. This is just our logic that we're doing now. We're not starting any programming, so we're just kind of brainstorming of what we actually need and what's more important than the other stuff. Okay, so we need a username, we need a password, and essentially at one point we're forward thinking that they're going to come back to us and say, is the person logged in already? Okay, so we're going to need to store a cookie at some point. Now the response that they want is true or false, and they want to know the error. Okay, which is fine. So that's the only thing that we need to return to them, is some method of them saying is the person logged in, and if it says true, then it's true. They don't need to care about the cookie. They just need to care about is the person logged in. Okay, we need to concern ourselves about the cookie. All right. So that's essentially all it is. Okay, that's essentially all it is right now. So let's scrap. Let's come down here then. So let's make a login folder, because this is the work that we're working on essentially, and we're going to name the file login. All right. So when we hand them the folder, we're going to say all you got to do is require the login file. Okay, and then the rest of the resources will be there. All right. Okay, so that's then just the main file, and what we're going to make is we're going to make a file of the actual logic itself. All right. Now we're going to say class login. That's what we're going to use. We're going to give them a class of a login. Now at the time being, we're not even going to go into the small bits. We just need to think, right, well, we need a class first of all to log in, and we'll make a constructor because we want one, but we are not doing anything here. All right, we're just going to completely null and void the constructor because we don't want it. We don't want it. So we're going to get rid of that. We're going to push that all the way down and come up here. The next thing we want to do is we essentially want to have a way of collecting the username and password into our class, because that to me is the most important thing, is logging the person in. Right, is we need the username and password first of all. So that's our logic. Now ultimately we don't need to care about this class. All right, this is the login.php page is where it's actually going to do it. All right, is that this is what we're going to give them and say this is what is going to happen, and as long as essentially we can collect these two things. That's what we need to be able to do. All right, is they've submitted the form, or however it's going to come. Now we're doing this in PHP, and we want to know that there's a username and password come in. So we're gonna get our we're going to instantiate our login object and do this, and we need to require once obviously the logic. We don't care about where it is because we know that it's inside that folder, so wherever they put this folder we're not really concerned about, as long as the logic.php is next to the login.php. Right, so we've got our login, and we just simply, really, to make it as simple as possible, is just going to say login, and we're going to go username and password. All right, and if it's not, that's all we're really concerned about, is if it's not logged in, then we need to know that we've got to return an array with results equals false and error equals login failed for the time being. That's what we've got to do, is we've just got to return this. Now if the login is successful, okay, Now we're in a file at the moment where we can't really return on a file, but we'll iron those things out as we go on. We're just getting the logic here of what it is that we want to do. Okay. So we've got if the person is logged in. Okay. If the person is logged in, then we need to set a cookie. So let's just say login set cookie. Okay, and what do we need in the for the cookie? We need, first of all, cookie name, and then we need the cookie value. So we'll just say value, and we need the path, and then we need the expires, and finally we're going to just say we're going to do domain. All right. So that's what we're doing. All right. Is that, and we'll say if set cookie maybe this text is a bit too big. That looks a bit better. Okay, so if login set cookie name, value, path, expires, domain, then we know that we've got it set. Now, do we really need to do anything? No. Is that all we got to do is say result false, error, failed to create cookie. All right, as simple as that. That's we're not caring about if it's successful. We're more caring about if it's not successful. All right. So at the moment, we know if the user's logged in. Yes, they are. Next, we've got to do is set the cookie. Now, what about us first of all testing if login? We'll call it active. So in this sense, we're going to be doing a positive comparison. The active is all about if there is a cookie set already. It might have already got to this stage, and we don't need to test all of this because it's already got the cookie. And if we've got the cookie, then essentially we can just return already. So we can then return array result equals true and error equals null. Yeah, right. So that's, and we're done. We're finished here. So we've done what we were told to do. Is that we know if the login is active, then it's there. All right. Now we need to really. So what we're going to have is we're going to have no, that's actually, I was just going to think about cleaning these up, but no. What we are going to have. No, okay. I think this is as abstract as it gets, and really what we need down here is result equals true, error equals false. Now we seem to be writing array result equals true a lot here. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to say result equals array. Okay, and results, and we're going to say result equals false. So we're going to be negative in the beginning. Error equals null. All right, and then all we got to do is this one essentially. This one's all it's got to do is set this and return results. Yeah. This one here just needs to return results, and same here, but we then set error equal to login failed. We'll copy this. Not creates cookie. Right, that's as simple as it gets there. So we know that if the user is active, then result equals true, and we're going to return the results. So for the time being, that's pretty much all we want to have. Okay, that is abstracting it down as much as possible. Now we just need to work on active. Okay, so we need to make public function active, and as we do this, we're going to make a description of what it does. So we're just going to call the class the method active. Say checks if the user is already logged in. It checks if the cookie has been set. The cookie name is within the cookie name used should be the login cookie name. Okay, so that means we're making stuff now. So we're going to say constant cookie name equals login cookie. I'll just make it that for the sake of it. Right, so now we know that this can't be changed. Okay, so that's what we're going to be checking against. All right, and it means that anyone else can use this one constant because it's openly available for someone to use. All right, so all we need to do is check if is sets, for example, cookie and self cookie name. That's done, and we can shorten this code even further. Essentially, let's do that there, there, and there. Okay, so that's it done. That's our and then we've got return boolean. Yeah, that's it. So that's our method there to see, as far as we're concerned, if this one cookie is set, then the person is already logged in. Okay, and we don't need to care about going any further. Right, so we're just going to say checks if login cookie name is sets, just for our own information. Okay, next thing we need to do is have a login method. And we know that we need username and password. So what we're going to have with this is to do it here. We're just going to say this dot yeah. No, we're just going to have clean. We're going to have clean the username password. Alright, And what this is going to do is it's going to remove any slashes, any SQL injection, etc., etc. Okay, so we're not too concerned about what it does. So we're just going to say private because it is a private one, and clean. And to distinguish whether a method is private, we're going to put an underscore before it. Okay, and if you don't know about references, I'm not going to explain it now, but essentially all we're going to do is we're going to pass a reference in, and then we're going to clean it. So we're just going to clean both username and password. This bit here is not something that we need to care about doing. Alright, nothing at all, because this is small chips. This is stuff that we can do later. Alright, it's not something that's important to concentrate on right now. Alright, all we need to know is that the username and password are clean. So we're going to bosh that out of the way because we don't care about it. Alright. Okay, but we are going to put a note, needs implementing. Okay, so we know that this actually needs to be done. The next thing we need to do is essentially we're gonna check first of all that the user exists. All right, we're not going to check the password. We're just going to check the user exists, and if the user does exist, we're then going to take the password and we're going to check it against the other password. So we're not going to do we want to minimize SQL injection as much as possible. So by minimizing it, we're taking away one of the fields that's inside of the select as such. It would be like select everything from, let's call it users, where username equals this and password equals this. All right. The more of this that we have, the more problems that we have. So we're just going to get rid of it. So essentially, we're just going to say where username is equal to this. Okay, and if we've got that one back, then we're happy, which means then we've got the password, which we can then check. All right. So this is not important. So if, and we're going to say this user, and this is a private one as well. User exists, and we're going to enter the username into it. Okay, and if the user doesn't exist, guess what? Boom, done. We're finished. So we know here that type equals string. We know here that essentially if the username doesn't exist in our database or our record, wherever we're getting it from, who cares? Finished, done. The whole point of a method is getting out of it as quick as you can with a result. That's it. So if the user doesn't exist, right, there's no point worrying about even this password, is there? Just need to drink some of my tea. Oh, I love it. Okay, so the user exists. What else do we need to do? Well, let's make this function, this method, shall I say, and we're going to put it down here because I'm fussed about this right now. So user exists, and string. We're just going to make a quick description of this. Checks if the user name is in the database, and we're going to say returns Boolean. Alright, so for the time being, as far as we're concerned, it's going to return true. Okay, and we're going to say needs implementing, also default returns true. Okay, so that's a little note for us that needs to be implemented. Okay, so once the user exists, okay, now essentially what we want to do is we want to get the user. All right, Now we've already done one call to this, so it's kind of done. It's done that query already with inside of here. Yeah, user exists. So we kind of possibly need to use this slightly, and this will actually return. And we're going to do user data in here, and inside of this we're going to send a reference to user data. Alright, and essentially the user data is going to be equal to a standard class, and password equals password, and user data username equals username. So all we're doing is, we don't need that. Okay, all we're doing is we are setting this inside of it. Okay, so if the user exists, we're going to user data equals new standard class. This is the information that we're going to use to check the password with. So we're going to send this in to the method, and essentially if we get to here, then we know that that user has been extracted from the database, and we know that we've got a password to play with now. Alright, so all we've got to do now is we've got to check whether the submitted password is equal to the database password. Now I don't really want to do any code in here, so we're going to say this password match, and we're going to say password, and we'll say user data password, because we don't know what we don't know what kind of encryption that we want to use. You know, that's not something that we really care about yet. So let's not bother thinking about it. All right, let's just have a private function method that checks whether the password matches, because, you know, do we want to use MD5? We don't want to use something else. How are we going to encrypt it? Is there a salt? Is there a this? Is there that? Who cares? Let's just not care about it. Let's just make a simple method, and let's just do it later. Okay, so if it's not, then false. Boom, done. We don't care. So let's implement this. Let's come down here. And user data, let's just get rid of that. User data password. So for the time being, if password is equal to user data password, return true, else return false. So let's give this return boolean. We've got string and password match. Really, let's do password compare. That sounds a little bit better to me. So password compare. Okay, so we're getting there. Let's save this. And we're at the moment our logic is done. Everything there is done. Okay. How we're going to pass this on at the moment, we don't know. Okay, but I'm not caring about it. That's simple as that. I'm not caring about it. So this password compare, it's all been sent in. It's all fine. We could. The one thing at the moment that's a little bit worrying is if this user data or this password is set. Okay, but essentially, as long as our user exists, well, if our user exist comes back as true, then we know that it's set. Okay, because we want to know that user exists actually sets that. Okay, okay, so this password compare. Once we've got a password compared and it's correct, well, let's just say update last login. Okay, so whoops, we don't want that. So all we're going to do here is we're going to update the last time that the user, well, we're going to update the last logged in time as now, all right? Because now essentially they are one step away from being logged in. So update last login, and this just needs then, let's just say user data, user ID, and time. That's what we're going to be doing. So we're just going to say time there. All right. So that means that user exist essentially needs to user ID needs to have 1 there. Alright, see how we're keeping this nice and simple. So we've got our user ID and time. Now we just need to implement this. We'll come down here, private function, boom, done, and we've got, take that away, time, and update last login column of this user. Who cares? Okay, return type is void, is an integer, and we're going to use a timestamp as well for this, and we're going to then update last login, this update, whoops, the last login time stamp in the database. That's it, done. Right, that's all we care about for now. And needs implementing. All right, that's it. Now, as far as we're concerned, if at this one time we can return true, because we know that the user's logged in. Okay, we've passed all of the tests and we've done it because we know that where is it? That login just needs a true or false there, and that set cookie is going to be doing everything else. All right. Now we need to decide what the value is of this. That's one thing. So let's come here, and we just need to take this, and essentially we now need a public function with this cookie name. So set cookie, done. That's all we're really caring about right now, and we're going to return true, and that's it. That's it. Now the final thing is kind of you just need to be able to encapsulate all of this, because you don't want the other programmer having to program all of this. Alright, this is the information that we wanted. So now we've got login, and we're going to kind of remove all of this, and we're going to make this the most important method. Okay, so public function executes. Right, that's all we care about, is executing this. Okay, so we're going to have to change some of this to that there, that there, and come back to here, and let's take this away. And essentially we need this here. Yep. And this cookie name is self cookie name. Value, value not decided yet. So once it's logged in, this is the one thing that we've got left to do, is once it's logged in, is now get the actual user data. Alright, so because we need a value to distinguish the user to the cookie. Alright, so we can check this at a later point, so we know which user is actually logged in. Okay, so potentially what we're going to do is we're just going to say user equals this get user. Alright, now this can be a private function method as well, so we're going to say get user. Now this get user is quite an important method, so it's going to stay at the top, get user. Now the question is how can we well, we know that the user is logged in, or we know that the user is correct. Okay, so we can use the username. All right. Now we kind of we've done it here. We've done the extraction already. Okay, so what we can do is up here is we're going to make this a private variable up here. Now once the user data has been stored, that's all we care about, right? So when they are logged in, so we're going to say this user data here, so we're going to change this slightly to be the user data, and that's what we're passing in. Now the question is do we need to pass this into user exists anymore? Okay, no, because it's now part of the object itself. So user exists can come down here, and let's change this to, oops, we're adapting the code, we're not changing it really, just adapting it. And we can then remove that because that was getting too complicated, passing in references to this, that and the other and so on. Okay, so just to clean this up now, remember we're starting top to bottom, and as we're moving down on each level's got to be slightly more complicated than the previous level. This was level 1, yeah, that was it in its simplest form. Okay, this was level 2, okay, that was making it in its simplest form, and we need to update this. So if login executes, so we need to username password, and if not, then we know that there's something wrong. Okay, but this here is what the developer needs to use. All right, this is what we're going to give them. It is nothing more than that. So then they can put their code here. We say developer, place your code here. User logged in. All right, that's all we need to tell them to do. Is boom, done. Your person is logged in, and that's the only thing that you need to do. All right. So where are we at the moment? We're just cleaning up. User exists username. If not false, this password compare Yeah, we've got user data, so we need to update that. That there. And last login, update that there. Set cookie. Alright, so set cookie, the value essentially is going to set a cookie with the data. Now, get user, for example, is that this is going to return user data. Alright, that's essentially it. So if login is if user exists, we're still gonna we don't need to instantiate that as an object, but if user exists is the key thing here. All right, because user exists is the one that's actually making this one is deciding if this is actually a user. So in the beginning, user data is null. All right, that's all we care about. Is it's null. If user exists, that's the person, or that's the method that's deciding. Hey, I'm your authoritative figure here. I will tell you whether that user exists. And essentially, that in the background is this method in the background is the one getting the user data from the table or the resource or wherever you're getting it from, and populating user data so you can do the comparison for everything else. Alright, this method doesn't care whether the user's logged in or not. It's more the model. Okay, it's the business logic of getting the data from wherever the data comes from. Alright, that's it, done. And password compare is just a simple, this password compare, its ultimate job is the one to say, hey, well, you're giving me a password, you'll give me two passwords, and I'll decide how they were encrypted, okay, or how they were hashed, or how I've got to do the comparison. The other people just don't care about it. It's not relevant. Okay, if the main developer says, hey, we're going to change our encryption to this, then that's where the method needs to be changed. So we've got execute. We've checked if the user is active. So essentially, even we're at a point up here, if where we could set user data up here, this active. Oh no, sorry, we're not active. We don't at this one point. We don't care. We're just checking if the user is active already. And login doesn't need to care about anything else. If it's just got the cookie, then it's done. We're checking whether the user's logged in. We've got the user. We've got the user data. So right, from this one point here, we know that if it's gone through login, yeah, then we know that user exists has been the one that's populated user underscore data. So come to here and we'll say if this, we're just going to do a final check ourselves, is not equal to null, and this is, we'll say is an object. It's not equal to null. Actually, we don't care about doing that, and is not an object. We're going to say here, and at this one point, this technical problem. This was nothing to do with the user or anything like that. It was just a technical problem. Because why is user data equal to null, and why is it not an object? That's to me something has fundamentally gone wrong inside of the code. All right. So if this is set cookie, the value, what we want in here is we're going to say user data and user ID. Okay. Path, we're going to say this expires. We're just going to say time plus 30 for the time being, and domain is example.com. Okay, we're kind of we're kind of setting ourselves up here for some problems by doing this, but to be quite honest with you, I don't care at this one time. That's that done. Okay, this essentially is at a point where you could turn around and say, well, 90% of the logic is finished. Right now all we got to do is fill in the small stuff. Okay, and we've only been doing this for however long, but you're at a point where if someone says to you, how much have you done, and you say, well, I've done the logic and now I've just got to fill in the different gaps. All right, that's it. You know, you can spend like a week going through all of these different things, but from now on, every time you do something, if you do clean, you need to make sure that you only stay inside of clean. Okay, you don't want to use anything else, right? Clean is now your one main logic. All right, so you essentially need to start from here again. All right, top to bottom of what the clean is. And when user exists, this needs to be top to bottom again. Password compare, top to bottom again. Right, and this one here, update last login, top to bottom again. So now you've done all the things that you wanted to do, and essentially you've got a way of working out if the person is logged in. Now, in execute, for example, that's only if the person is logging in with username and password. So theoretically speaking, we still need a way of checking if they're active. So you could just say active. All right, so this needs to be kind of an outside one, as in something that can be used by the users of the login class, the login object. Okay, so if login is active, then user is already logged in. That's essentially it. Else, this comes down here, and you go from there. So it's kind of a case of develop plate code, user logged in, problem with login in. That's what it is, you know. All right. Well, I think, I could go on this and on this and on this until this is completely finished. But the whole point of it is, I'm not here to teach you how to program PHP. I'm here to teach you how to enhance your programming logic. Now, I'm just kind of doing this off the cuff. You know, I'm sitting down and I'm working out, and I could have spent a lot longer doing this. But all I wanted to prove to you is that if you're spending like a whole day on this, something's gone wrong. Okay, if you're spending, this should be, I don't know, maybe I'd like to say maybe an hour and a half should do this. I mean, all of the database connections and stuff like that, that's another thing totally. That's a completely different topic. But passing a username and password to the database interface that you've got to say, hey, give me this user, that's one thing. So you don't need to, you shouldn't overlap those two things together. All right, so they're two separate things. Anyway, this is the first example. I'm going to have a drink of my tea, and going to move on to the next example. Okay, if there is one. All right, top to bottom. Haven't quite decided yet, but I hope you've learnt something from this. Okay, thank you very much. Bye bye.